I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is a sad clown.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3Omaha packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
This is the first time we've had a guest on twice, and if anybody remembers, Grillz' very first interview also had poor sound quality. So we're trying to keep the trend going.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to make sure that. Hold on, I'm putting in my earphones.
So just to respect your time, let's kick us off. We got a special guest on the show today. I think for me personally, this has been one of those guys that has always challenged me to just be a better man. He's also recently been site Q at the battlefield, got that AO off the ground, handed it off to samples, and has also taken on some new roles as our member of the 3rd F team. So we've got Grillz on with us today. And Grillz, I wonder if you would just get us started, how we always do, with just the history of who brought you out to F3, what was that first workout like, and why the name Grillz?
Yeah, well, so thanks for having me on, guys. First of all, it's an honor to be a part of this. But yeah, so I, like most guys, or like some guys, you know, I have that story where Brazilian was very persistent with me. I live down the street from him, and he had been on me to get into a workout, and you know, I gave him all the excuses. Oh, I already work out a couple days a week, and you know, it's early, I travel a lot, whatever. And finally, he had, throughout my excuses, had picked up that I was open on Mondays, and that would kind of be a day that would work. And so he came to me when we opened the district and said, next week, we'll see you at the school. We're going to have a Murph. And so that's how it, I had no excuse.
And what were you doing in terms of workout before?
Yeah, so, you know, I was running a little bit, and then before he was Sister Act, I had been working out with Rob Hockney for, oh gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, every Tuesday, Thursday in the gym. But you know, that was, before we called it Second F, that was a lot about the Second F. So, yeah, so that's what I was doing Tuesday, Thursday, was running a little bit, you know, by myself kind of thing. So kind of a sad clown in my workout.
I'm going to ask, just because I know some of the history, you know, Grillz, maybe where you were at. It sounds like physically you have some fitness stuff going on, but spiritually, I mean, when you kind of found yourself at that Murph, what was your reaction to just the culture or the workout itself? I mean, any thing you remember there?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I just thought it was great that there were guys that were on some sort of a faith journey, because, you know, we're all on a journey, and we're all at different levels on that journey. And so just the fact that there was a space for men who were, you know, open to the idea that there's something beyond themselves that they're living for. And then you could, you know, pair that with a workout, and that you could kind of create this community. So, I mean, for me, it was a really easy thing to get behind, just because there are guys that, you know, don't have open conversations, and there's not a space where that's really celebrated in a lot of places. And I would say even in you know, even in parts of the you know, Christian faith, which is where, you know, I kind of land, it's not always celebrated to have this open and honest dialogue about where guys are at in their life. And so that's really what I really, you know, loved about the first workout, and that was very apparent early on that was kind of what F3 was about.
I love that. One of my favorite memories at the Murph with you, Grillz, was shortly after, you know, I was trying to right size my life and get better, recover from addiction. I remember kind of complaining one time about my M, and I remember you pulling me aside and kind of saying, hey, the way you're talking about your M is not putting her in a good light, and I know her, and she wouldn't appreciate that. And that was one of my first real moments of like, wow, these guys can really help hold me accountable for who I'm trying to be. But that kind of aspect of brotherhood, or, you know, you kind of came into the group with that. I'm wondering if you've seen that in other areas or in other relationships as time has gone on, and what's been your experience there?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny when you look back on conversations you have, or people that say stuff to you, and you don't realize kind of maybe in the moment what you're being told is impactful. At least for me, I've had those moments where guys have pulled me aside and told me different things or shared different things with me. And kind of in the moment, I didn't realize it, but looking back, that really was a conversation that set me on maybe a different trajectory a little bit. But so, you know, it starts for me, those conversations, you know, I've shared kind of with some of the guys at coffee and stuff that, you know, I didn't really have a dad that was very involved. And when he was involved, it was kind of like, I always give the example because it kind of illustrates it pretty well. He, you know, he wouldn't go to any of the campouts for Boy Scouts. And he wouldn't really work with me in the, you know, in the day-to-day of the merit badges and those kinds of things. But boy, when I was on stage getting some award, he was there. And, you know, that as a kid, you notice that stuff. And I'm thankful that I've been in a place in my life where I've been able to kind of heal those past wounds with my dad and reconcile those. But men have been put in my life at different points to really kind of fill that void. And, you know, for me, I believe that that's something that God has done in my life, and put these men there to really have those hard conversations. So it's something that in my life had been a part of my life. And, you know, I'm in this Bible study with these guys on Fridays, and we've been meeting together, a few of us, for, oh gosh, you know, close to 10 years. And so just kind of the conversations that come up after you know guys that long, it's something that has been a big part of my life. And, you know, it's not easy when you've got guys that come alongside you and maybe tell you a hard truth. But after you can kind of process it a little bit, you know, you realize that this is something that you need in your life if you're going to accelerate. You need guys that are going to be willing to, you know, respectfully and in love, pull you aside and kind of say, hey, you know what, maybe you should think about this a little differently. And if they're guys you love and respect, then you know there's a mutual understanding that we're here to help each other accelerate.
Right, and I couldn't agree more. I guess, you know, for someone like you, I do get the sense, and I agree with Blake here, that it is easy for you to do that. I think even when I first met you, you were just someone who opened up with me and continue to hold me accountable to this day, and have been a great friend to me for the time that I've known you. I guess, what do you think it is about F3 or the organization itself that, you know, even for the harder guys, they eventually open up at some time, right? I mean, It may be a couple months, it may be 6 months in a year. I mean, eventually the walls come down. I guess, what is it you think that kind of fosters that environment and makes it okay for, you know, guys to be vulnerable with each other and open up and be honest with each other?
Well, you know, there's something about you know, men that we're not naturally vulnerable with each other. And I think you know, when you read Free to Lead and you kind of dig into F3 and what F3, you know, how it was founded and why kind of the things that they found out that work. You know, there's something that's built in kind of sharing a struggle with someone. And, you know, so we get out there every single day in the gloom and we share in a physical struggle. And we're there to push each other. And, you know, when you're there like that, that breaks down just naturally for guys, that breaks down barriers. And so I think that is a huge piece, that workout piece, that thing that we do in common is the thing that kind of sets us up for being able to have those conversations. And then once you're kind of there, you know, you have this name that you're given. And I think there's, for men, there's something through going through that ritual of kind of getting a name, that kind of, empowers you and brings you close together. And so you've got your, you know, your name that you were given by your parents and that you go by kind of out there in the real world. But then, you know, when you come into this organization and you've got these guys that rally around you and they give you kind of a new name, you know, for me, there's some faith elements in there, because that's biblical. God gives you a new name. And so I think that there's just stuff that resonates with our soul on that level, that then allows us to start the process of becoming vulnerable with each other. And that's kind of how it all starts. And then you're there every day. There's something about consistency and, you know, proximity that really help with opening that up. And before you know it, you know, you're just being real with some other guys and maybe telling them stuff you haven't ever told anybody before.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've never really heard anyone talk about the importance of the names, right? And my mind immediately went to, it just kind of helps push egos and all of the other BS to the side, because regardless of how tough and cool you are outside of F3, it's tough to be the cool guy when everyone's calling you pony or khakis. Like that, you're like, whatever your image of just kind of just goes to the side and you adopt this like real true image of who you are once you've gotten these names. Now, I mean, Plague is kind of a cool name. I don't think it's very fitting for like who he is as a person. It like sounds too cool. And Grillz is like way too hip for who I consider you as a person. But I mean, you've kind of come into these identities, and I think it just ends up working. I love that. You know, no one's really focused on that, and I don't think that gets enough attention. So thanks for sharing that for sure.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah, definitely. I'm not hip enough to have the name Grillz for sure. And you know, on the name thing too, you know, like you said, it breaks down these barriers, and you don't put up with all this BS that you have in the kind of in your regular life. And one thing that I've, you know, told people is like, you know, there are these guys that like I've been working out with and I don't even know what they do. And they're like, well, how do you not know what they do? And you know, how can you say they're a really good friend, but you don't even really know what they do? And, you know, for me, the answer is really simple, you know, because that's not really what it's about. You know, I'm involved in other organizations where you walk in the room and on your name tag, it's your name and what you do. And that's really what the conversation centers around. And then, you know, at F3, it's not really about that. It's about something that's deeper than that. And so you get past these kind of surface level conversations pretty quickly.
And you know, Grillz, I want to pick up on that here in a minute, but I think some of what you're saying too, we hear threads of the common struggle in like Wild at Heart, right? And that book that you're so passionate about. And you know, I think you did a really cool thing pairing the Battlefield AO with that book study and giving guys another tool that they could reference to really, you know, just discover more about themselves. I wonder if you could talk us through that, sort of the inspiration you had to get that AO started and the connection with that book.
Yeah. So, the Wild at Heart book is something that's really, it resonates with me because of the struggle that I shared earlier about my dad kind of not being around all the time and really just kind of showing up for the, for the big things. And the premise of the book Wild at Heart is really about how God takes us on this journey to be dependent, on what He provides for us, and that even if you don't have this dad that you have to kind of bring you into manhood, that God can do that for you and with you. And so that's when I said that, there were these men that were very positive role models that were kind of put in my life at very crucial times, and made a huge impact on me. When I then got into college and was introduced to this book, Wild at Heart, and I read it, I was like, this makes so much sense to me. And this is what, can keep a lot of men from being vulnerable with each other, is they're struggling to find out what their own identity is. And it is so much like the sad clown that we talk about in F3, is that, really, the sad clown syndrome is something that we're struggling with every day, all the time. And it's just that we've got to remind ourselves every day, what this bigger picture is, and that we're a part of this bigger story. And so then whenever I started talking to Tater and some of the guys about a site, this idea of we're going to battle and we're getting prepared for battle, and there's just so many similarities to what we're talking about in F3 and what this book was about in terms of themes. And so it just was really impactful that I was like, you know what, I got to call this the battlefield, because every day we're helping to prepare men for the battlefield of life. And that's kind of how it got started, and the connection.
So I do want to dive in a little bit and have you talk about some of the third F offerings with book studies and that sort of thing. But also, I think some of what you're saying is maybe inspired this impact retreat. And I don't know if you could give us a little insight into that. Could a guy that's looking at that expect to maybe learn more about their identity or purpose at that retreat?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, you got to give a shout out to Birdman, because Birdman is the him that's out there. He's doing Truth Nugget Thursdays at the Berm, and then or started that, and then he kind of reached out and said, hey, I know you did this book study of Wild at Heart, and you're obviously passionate about accelerating kind of in all three Fs. And so he then came to me and Sparty and LPC and just kind of said, hey, what do you guys think about, doing something like this? And so for me, it was a no-brainer that, when you look at F3 and you look at the concentrica and you look at all these different, let's call them tools that F3 has out there for men to really help accelerate and even measure their acceleration, we are looking for ways that we've got to be accelerating in all three. And I'll even put it out there that F3 would say, I've heard Dredd say it on podcasts, and especially there's one about study that he does. And I think it just really sums it up really nicely. He's like, you know what? If I don't care if you're a Bob Dylan spiritualist, and he has these different names for these different kind of aspects of faith that you might be searching after or going after, but to dig in and go in at that with all you've got, be reading everything you can about that and try to accelerate. And so for me, that's where the impact retreat really comes in, is we're giving this tool or this weekend where men who are looking to accelerate in the third F. And, for each guy, that's going to maybe look different for what that acceleration is, or what that acceleration means, or, where they are in their journey. And so there's no real expectation of a certain level of, because nobody's ever achieved it, right? We're not there. It's a journey. We're all on this journey. And so this impact retreat, I believe, will really meet guys where they're at and give them an opportunity to look at how they can accelerate in the third F for whatever that looks like for them. A little plug, I will say that there's going to be some really cool aspects to the weekend that are going to be intentionally kind of kept close until guys are there. So it's going to be a really fun time for the guys that choose to come to just be with each other and kind of have some really cool experiences that maybe maybe will be a surprise. So that's the impact retreat and kind of how it got started. And then, in terms of the third F piece, because you ask about that, so now we've put together, Wentworth put together this kind of group of guys that are helping to kind of put some different elements into the third F and help kind of that be really more or really well rounded out to kind of to really give the full expression of what living life in the third F can be about. And so one thing that, it's a personal passion, but I just get blown away at the content that F3 puts out there for us to use. So on the third F, to really leverage those tools and bring them to kind of the forefront. And so you get these guys that are somewhat interested in accelerating, in the third F, and then they can go, to a Q source. And then from the Q source, maybe you find a group of guys that you can shield lock with. And then once you're in that shield lock, what are you doing to grow? And it doesn't have to be, a Bible study, but, what kind of books are you reading, or what kind of conversations are you having that are intentionally leading you to accelerate? Because what I love about what Dredd says is that, and F3 in general, if you're not accelerating, then you're decelerating. There's no middle ground there. You're either accelerating or you aren't. And I subscribe to that and think that, if you're not looking at ways that you're accelerating, then really you're kind of moving backwards. And so that's the beauty of F3 and this accountability thing, is that, you can have guys that now they'll keep you accountable in every F, the first, the second, and the third.
Well, and I love the beauty of the content that F3 has, because it's really, results are produced by consistency over time, right? And so we don't need new information or new content necessarily all the time. It's really just embedding the existing content into the way we live our lives. So I love the idea of just, why not use the content that's already there and just get it into the hands of more guys so that it becomes more common terminology or common language.
Right. I mean, yeah, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here, and I think for me, it starts with the reading Free to Lead. I mean, if you're coming to an F3 workout and you've been coming for a while and you haven't, picked up a copy of Free to Lead, then, you're missing out on some of the really great things that F3 is about, that could help you grow and accelerate. And that's a really simple thing to do.
Speaking of that though, Grillz, and we've kind of bounced around a lot, but could you tell us a little bit about your own journey as far as like first, second, and third F? I mean, how has F3 impacted or helped you to accelerate? 'Cause I think I've noticed the past few years you just continue to grow and accelerate, but what's that been like for you? What have been some helpful activities or relationships that have pushed you along the way?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the F3's been awesome for me personally. You know, there's these elements of friendship, the elements of fitness, and the elements of faith have always been a part of my life. And in the past, and I'm sure in the future, you know, they take a backseat, or they're forefront, or they're accelerating. And so where F3 really has helped me is to, you know, put all three of them kind of into focus. And there's just been so many, I mean, in terms of relationships, I mean, you know, I think all of us struggle with authentic male relationships just in general, because that's not something that the world really celebrates. And so while I've had authentic male relationships outside of F3, to come into F3 and you just have these guys that are all just hungry for, you know, being authentic with one another. And so, I mean, what the thing about the first F is, you know, and my M, probably like a lot of us, you know, has a kind of a love-hate relationship with the gloom, because she sees that I'm better for our family when I can get up and get a good workout in kind of before the day gets going. But there's that kind of what I would call maybe like a healthy tension of what that's like, but that keeps me in every day, in at least, you know, wanting to be in a workout, or gives me an opportunity to have that, where before, you know, there's an excuse because, you know, maybe when I was working out with Rob, he was out of town or I was out of town. So there's that consistency issue. And, you know, so we're doing this interview at a time where I've kind of been out of the gloom for a couple of weeks. And I was in town for one day and got a chance to go to a Smurf and a Murph at the district on last Monday. And, you know, what I told the guys there was just, you know, it's so refreshing. And so I'm so thankful to know that I can not even have to call any of them. And I can show up at 4:45 in the morning for a Smurf and know that there's going to be a group of guys there to work out with. And so that's been a huge part on the first F. And then on the second F, I mean, I can't even name the just all the guys that have been so helpful to me in just becoming a better man. And, you know, I definitely count Pony and you, Plague, as guys that have been a big impact on that. You know, funny, Sister Act, I got to mention him because, you know, we had this relationship that was really great when we worked out together 2 days a week. Now I would actually say we probably work out less together, but our relationship, I feel like, and I don't know what he would say about this, but I feel like in some ways our relationship has gotten stronger, just because we have this commonality in so many different things with F3. So that's the second F. And then on the third F, I mean, just giving an area where there's guys that want to be better than where they are, and recognize that there's something that's outside of themselves that's bigger. I think that's a huge thing in faith, that you've got to acknowledge that the world does not revolve around you. And that is a hard thing for me. You know, I had my Bible study today, and I said, you know, sometimes I just want to be in control, and I want to be, you know, I want to be the center of it all. And I think the biggest struggle with that is with my M. You know, I want to be the main guy, and that's just not how it works in my family all the time. So just having those tools to kind of deal with that and recognize that and work through that in a positive way. All of that is what F3 is to me.
That's a great and well thought out response, man. I certainly appreciate it. I'm going to put you on the spot here and kind of ask you if you needed to challenge yourself to one thing to get better at in some aspect of one of the 3 F's, what would that be? And then what would your challenge to the group be?
Oh, that's great. You know, it's easy to think about this stuff in theory, but boy, when you gotta, so can I start with the challenge to the group? Because that's easier.
Sure. Yeah.
No, so the challenge to the group, and it's going to be kind of similar to what, I'll go into a little more detail with myself, but to find one thing to accelerate in. And if you really want to challenge yourself, maybe find one thing in each F to accelerate in. And every guy knows where they're at in that. And it can't be a comparison thing. It can't be I want to be like this guy over here. It's got to be, where am I at? And let's do a real honest assessment about where we're at. And then pick a goal and get there. So that would be my challenge to the group. I think, so a challenge to myself, one thing that I personally struggle with is comparison. And I was at a meeting with my wife. We went on this trip and we were listening to this speaker, and the speaker said, comparison is the thief of joy. And I would like to think that that's maybe something that we all kind of struggle with, but for me, that can be something that I'm going along, I feel like I'm accelerating, and then all of a sudden I'm distracted by some shiny object. And that could be, somebody got a car that I want, or somebody got a promotion, or, but it's all these surface level things that do not matter in the end, that I believe. So for me, I would say that is, from a biblical perspective, that's kind of the devil sneaking in and trying to attack. And I feel like I get attacked in areas where maybe some people say that I'm strong. Really, one thing that's interesting is, and I think we all get there, we have these strengths, and that's where people come in, or anybody who wants to kind of take you down a little bit can come in and really attack those areas. And so, for me, if I'm going to boil it down to actually answer your question and not skirt around it, it's really to really just be still in who I am, and to know and to continue to remind myself that, I am created the way that I'm created, and to really make sure that I'm doing an honest assessment of myself to make sure that there's no pride getting in there, which, is also something that, you can easily struggle. I can easily struggle with. If someone says some nice things about me, I can kind of get puffed up in my head, and that's not good either. So, yeah, so I don't know if does that answer your question?
It does. And you actually touched on something, that I want to go back and just circle to. So you brought up strength and how usually you kind of gravitate toward those things, right? I mean, that's something that you're good at, or you're perceived as being good at, or someone's told you in the past that you've been good at. What I think is often overlooked, and you kind of touched on it, you're going to have people come in and try and bring you down a little bit, but even unintentionally, whether it's God or SkyQ or whoever, there's always going to be these challenges to your strengths. There's always going to be, at some point, someone coming in saying, are not even saying anything, but just being better than you at what you consider to be strong at. And that's just life, man. That's it's completely humbling. And I think F3 kind of presents the opportunity for guys to see different perspectives or see other guys who may be stronger at the things that they consider themselves strong at. Not only is that humbling, but it allows them to say, okay, well, I'm not the greatest at this. What else am I also missing, right? What are the areas that I'm weak in? Can I build those up? So I'm glad you hit on that. I think it's often overlooked. And I think F3 actually provides like an opportunity for us to, you know, be brought down just a little bit. Sometimes we need it.
Oh, absolutely. Can I tell a story real quick about a workout that brought me down a little bit?
Absolutely.
So anytime I want to go run, and be brought down, I go run with the plague, and he's just chit chatting, and I'm like gasping for air. So there's that. But no, I would say I'm a solid middle of the pack guy. You know, sometimes I'm towards the front, sometimes I'm toward the back, but I've never in a workout really been the 6. I've been the 6 in a lot of areas of my life, but in a workout with an F3, I can just say that, you know, rarely am I there. But I went to Huffy's site on a Friday, a few months back, and it was my first time there. And they were like, well, where do you want to go? You know, where do we want to go run? And so, of course, I was kind of like, well, let's go do the hard one. Well, that brought me down because it was all hills, both ways. And then we circle up for the workout, for the beatdown, and Huffy takes us over to the garage in Exarban. And waiting at the garage are these homemade sleds. And I'm sure if you've ever been, you know, you've probably seen them, and there are cinder blocks in them. And we pair up, and we have to drag these sleds and do some other things up the ramp. And the entire time I am like, not only am I the 6, I'm the 6 by like a huge margin. And that was something that, and I told Huffy this a couple of weeks after the workout. I said, Huffy, you know, I've not had a workout at F3 where I've really been that mentally challenged. The physical challenge was one thing, but the mental challenge that I had to like get over myself for like literally a week. And so that is one area where, you know, I really was brought down to like, hey, you know what? This is a real struggle. And I think that goes back to when I mentioned my struggle with comparison. I mean, I don't think there was any one guy that I was comparing myself to, but I was certainly comparing myself to something that I thought I shouldn't be the 6. And that was my mental struggle. And so, I loved that happened because it wasn't fun. But now I can look back and put it into perspective and realize that was a growth opportunity for me. That was an opportunity for me to accelerate. And those are the kinds of opportunities that we have to look back at. And I miss them all the time. I mean, I miss opportunities all the time where I could use that as an acceleration opportunity. But we've got to be aware of these opportunities where it feels like a struggle, but really that struggle is where we're going to find that acceleration opportunity. And there's a book by a guy named Erwin McManus, and he basically talks about that when we're struggling and we're coming up against something, pushing through that is really where we find, you know, true contentment is pushing through that struggle and persevering until it's over. And then that's where we can find this true contentment.
Man, Grillz, I love that. I think that's a good lead into, you know, because a lot of our new guys, they start there, right? They don't know any different. They come in and they're the 6 right away because it's just all so new. Would that be your advice to the FNG, to persevere through that struggle, or what else would you tell a new guy or even one of our existing packs, like when a new guy shows up to a workout, what could we or should we be doing better to make sure they are really brought into our community?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely I would say you should persevere, but it's hard because we all have egos. And so if we get caught up in this comparison thing, you show up to your first F3 workout and, there's some guys that are super fit and that can be tough. But yeah, if you're a new guy and you've come to a couple workouts, I mean, I've been doing this long enough now, 2.5 years, that, I've seen guys come in and accelerate like crazy. And I mean, I'm not even going to name any guys because there's just so many of them. But so certainly persevere. And then for guys that are in the packs, and, I'm speaking to myself when I say this. So it's not a judgment or anything like that. But, when there's a new guy, notice them, go up to them, introduce yourself, and just maybe run a lap around the track with them. One of the laps or whatever, or ask them a question about themselves. I do not do that very well, but I certainly think that that's an easy thing that we can do. And there's a lot of guys that do it really, really well. And honestly, like, whenever I first showed up, Plague, you were a guy that did that for me. Slow Pitch was a guy that did that for me. And it makes a difference. Khakis was a guy, all those district guys that, this was back when there was only one site on a Monday. And that was huge for me.
Anything else, any other memories, stories, words of wisdom just from your time in F3 to encourage or motivate guys?
Well, I don't know. I've shared a couple stories. There's a lot of stories that are fun. But I'll just end by thanking, I want to thank you guys because, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of work to do what you guys are doing in helping the pack share their stories. And I think that, there's a lot that we can learn from other people's stories and other people's shared struggles. And so for you guys to put together a platform where guys can just talk and share fun stories and share their kind of words of wisdom or whatever they want to talk about, I think is a platform that's super impactful for guys, because I've listened to, a number of your episodes, and, just the littlest things that guys share that, that's probably just a little side note sometimes to them is like a hugely impactful thing. I mean, that I'm like, I got to remember that. I got to implement that into my life. And so, so thank you guys for doing that. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I think we're just, obviously every story we hear, we're super gracious that people are even willing to take the time to speak with us.
Yeah.
And I think we're just happy that there's someone out there listening besides Plague and I constantly repeating the same podcast over and over.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Grillz, I'm the same way. I've got a list of all the things that guys have said that have been impactful. And, for me, you can read books, you can, listen to other podcasts, whatever way you get your knowledge, but there's something about true lived experience that's so valuable, and especially from guys in your community, a guy that you could go and tap on the shoulder and say, hey, tell me more about that. It's really been impactful. So selfishly, I think, this doing this podcast has benefited me maybe more than anybody else, but definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, well,
I think so too. And I think I'm sorry, girls, go ahead, man.
I was just going to add one thing, because you said about, shared community, Plague, and, that is one thing that I think is really cool about what F3 is doing in the communities is, in reinvigorating male community leadership, we're actually connecting males in our neighborhood with each other. So, I kind of joke with guys that, our kids, as they grow up, they're not going to be able to get away with some of the stuff maybe I got away with, because I'm like, I know that kid's dad, and I can, So there's just that sense of community that we're building that is absolutely invaluable, in my opinion.
I agree, and I think that's a good way to kind of go out on the heels of that statement there. So guess we'll wrap up here with the Name-A-Rama, and I will start. John Whitworth on 30, Pony Express.
Davin Bickford.
Brandon.
Davin Bickford, 38, Grillz.
Grillz, thank you. And we may have lost Brandon Fleehardy. I think he's like 30-something, maybe 40. He's got a new baby, so if you take some time to congratulate him, please do when he is the plague. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Davin, for your time, man. Appreciate you.
Hey, man, I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, buddy.